Hi, this is Charles Malki, biologist and plant expert with Ivory Organics, where we grow cool plants. And today we're here at the Sylmar Agricultural Center, which is led by Steve List. And we're here with the Dave Wilson Nursery special guest speaker, Tom Spellman, that'll be talking about several educational gardening lessons to help make this your best growing season ever. Enjoy.
And yeah, welcome. My name is Steve List. I am the teacher here at Sylmar High School. We're going to say this is the 6th annual Fruit Tree Symposium. And today is a great day to ask questions about fruit trees. You got some of the best experts in the world here. And I'm not exaggerating. You know, these two guys know more than all of us put together, I think. Anyhow, I'm going to introduce the president of the Los Angeles chapter of CRFG. Let's give Tony a big hand.
Thank you, sir. So Steve and I go back quite a ways, but my wife goes back to junior high school with Stephen, so we kind of, our paths met years and years later. So if you want any dirt, my wife's got it all, and I've got quite a bit of dirt. So we're all proud of Steve, though, and what he does here. So Tom Spellman's going to talk to us about fruit trees and everything you want to know, and questions, he's the man.
All you want. You want to cut off everything except the side growth and put it on a trellis, that's fine. You want to cut it down lower and do a low canopy. If you really want a big tree, grow a big tree. I'm fine with that. It's not my tree. So yeah, it's whatever works for your particular situation. I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. I'm not telling you what you have to do. I'm telling you what's worked for me for 40 years. So, and that's it. This is just another way to grow trees, another philosophy on what to do in your backyard. By no means is this the only method that works, but this is what's worked for me. Yes?
If you have a tree that's just a pole, like a big tree and doesn't have any branches, what would you use?
Cut it down to knee high?
Knee high?
Yeah. Sure, I want a low canopy.
Would you
So.
check where like there's buds to cut above it?
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, you want to make that cut. You want to make that cut to a bud that's going to structurally create a foundation branch in an area where you want it.
Okay.
So do I want that branch to be facing east, or do I want it to be facing west? You know, because that apical dominance is going to continue. Wherever I make that cut, the bud that's just below that cut is the one that's going to grow out most aggressively. So that's what I want to look at. If I want it to go this way, then that's where I'm making the cut. If I want it to go that way, then that's where I'm making the cut. Again, the philosophy on that is, if I do get a freeze, I've got growth that I can prune out and reestablish that structure. So you don't want to do pruning of subtropicals in the fall or in the winter. You want to do it after danger of frost. Okay, let's move on. So let's say that the next most important concept for me for backyard orchard culture is understanding your individual microclimate. I don't care what USDA zone you're in or what sunset western zone you're in. Those are big, big, vague zones. They really don't mean much of anything. What is important to understand is what happens on your particular piece of property. What are the results that I'm going to get on my property as far as wintertime lows, summertime highs? Where is my light exposure during the day? Where do I have full sun? Where do I have part shade? Where do I have full shade? What time of year do I have sun in particular areas? You know, in the wintertime, the sun's pretty far to the south, and an area that had sun in August may not have sun in December. So you really have to understand how that works on your property in perspective to the way your property's laid out. You know, where are those cold areas? Where is an area where I can plant a pear tree and expect it's going to pick up a little more winter chill? So I'm getting an area that's going to be shaded in the winter and fully exposed to light and sun exposure in the spring and the summer. You know, where are my frost protected areas? Where do I want to grow a guava or a mango or a papaya or a cherimoya? Where am I going to keep it out of the cold winter areas? So I want to know where it's going to be cold in the winter. I want to know where it's going to be warm in the winter. I want to know, where do my winds come in from? Where are the damaging winds? And particularly in Southern California, Santa Ana winds are going to be your damaging winds. So I'm always looking at protecting things from those north east winds that come in during the Santa Anas. They can do a lot of damage to young trees. They can, they can push things over sometimes. They're so heavy and so aggressive. So I want to understand all those things about my property. I want to understand how my soil percolates. Where do I have good drainage? Where do I have poor drainage? And the only way to figure that one out is to go out and dig a bunch of test holes. You know, the ground's not going to tell you by looking at it what it does, but if I dig a dozen test holes on my property and make them all about the same, 12 inches wide, 18 inches deep, go back and fill them all with water, how long did it take to drain? So I can go over here and say, well, these 3 drained in about 15 minutes. And over here it took about 2 hours, and over there, well, there was still water over here the next morning. So that's an easy calculation. Good drainage, fair drainage, poor drainage. So I want to know that before I start stabbing trees in the ground, because some things are going to require fast draining soil and some things are not. So I want to make sure if I'm planting an avocado that it's in the area where I have frost protection in the wintertime, maybe I have some wind protection, and I have really good fast draining soil. So that's gonna give me success with an avocado tree. Maybe I want to plant a plum tree on citation rootstock. So the main attributes of citation are it takes a heavy wet soil. So if I have a clay soil over here, that's where I'm going to want to put my trees in on citation. So once you understand everything about your microclimate, your exposures, your high temperatures, your low temperatures, your drainage, your irrigation system, once you understand those things, that's the time to start putting trees and plants in the ground. Now you understand that what the situation is that you can work with. So you're going to put the right varieties into the right environment. Most of the time people just they go to the nursery, I want this Santa Rosa plum tree. So they'll buy that plum tree for $50 or whatever and take it home and just stick it out in the yard, and the tree dies in a month. So they drag out the corpse and they take it back to the nursery and they say, well, you sold me a bad tree. And the nurseryman's like, I have 60 more of them right here that all came out of the same crop, and I sold you the one bad tree? Come on. It probably has something to do with the climate that you put it in, or the soil that you put it in, or the new conditions that you planted it under, and not actually with the tree. But had you considered, was it on the right rootstock for this climate? Is it on the right rootstock for this soil? Is it the right variety for my area? I'm doing all the things that I need to do to grow this tree properly. That equals success. You're going to be successful with that. So make sure you're paying attention to your microclimate. You want to understand everything there is to understand about it before you start planting trees in the ground. Any questions on that? In general, if you dig a bigger hole, you're loosening up that soil, and that's good. That creates an environment that the root system can expand out into immediately, instead of having to grow through something that would be a harder, pan soil, or an area that the roots can't really penetrate well.
Just refill it with the native soil versus different soil.
I never use any planting amendment as a backfill, but I'm a huge advocate of mulch. I mulch the whole surface, so all the organics stay on the surface. They don't go down in the hole. I'm only backfilling with native soil. Okay, so let's consider different styles, different planting styles. Since we're not commercial farmers, we don't want to do things like a commercial farmer would. I don't want my landscape or my orchard to be laid out in north-south rows with trees 10 feet apart in the row. I don't want to walk out in my backyard and have it look like a farm. I want my backyard to be ornamentally appealing. I want it to be made up of things that are going to give me more than just a piece of fruit. I want flowers, I want fall colors, I want to use plants in forms and fashions that lend themselves to my landscape. So I'm using trees in other methods other than the fact that that's an apple tree doesn't mean that it has to be a tree. That tree could be a spelliard. That tree can be grown in a hedgerow. I can multiple graft it. I can multiple plant it. I'm going to do whatever works for my landscape scheme, and the size of the tree or the structure of the plant is going to be determined by me as far as the way that I prune it, the way that I train it, and the way that I raise it for the next 5 years. Just because it says it's an apple tree doesn't mean that I have to grow it like a tree. So if if I have a planter box that's 18 inches wide on a south-facing wall, and I want to grow an espaliered Fuji apple to 8 feet high and 12 feet wide, I can do that. I don't need to consider that it has to be outdoors like a tree. I can plant 3 or 4 varieties in the space of one. I can grow plants in hedgerows. Hey, let's consider this. Maybe I have a neighbor that has a horrible looking landscape, doesn't take care of his yard, doesn't mow the weeds or the lawn, has an old piece of junk car in his driveway. I'm tired of looking at all that. So I go down to the retail nursery and I say, I want to plant a hedge. I need a 40-foot hedge. I want it to be 8 feet tall. I want it to be 3 feet wide, and I want it to be solid so I don't have to look through it. So the nurseryman takes me out and shows me waxleaf privets and euonymus and photinias and boxwoods and maybe a cypress or a juniper or conifer of some kind, and all those things will make a very nice hedge. They'll all give me dense green growth, and they'll all give me a structure that's going to be blocking and give me that screen that I want. But could I use citrus for the same thing?
Yes.
Absolutely. So now let's look at this. Instead of planting a waxleaf privet or a photinia, now I've got a 40-foot run, so I plant 10 different dwarf citrus varieties 4 feet apart. I have beautiful, dense, glossy green foliage. I have flowers in the spring. In fact, Meyer lemon and Eureka lemon give me 6 to 8 months worth of fragrant, beautiful blooms every year. So I have a really nice blooming, fragrant structure. And now I've got 10 varieties of fruit. I've got, mandarins for the winter, mandarins for spring. I've got navel oranges for winter, Valencia oranges for summer. I've got my ruby grapefruit for summer, my Oro Blanco for winter. I've got a bare seedless lime in there. I've got all kinds of Mineola Tangelo. I've got all these different varieties. So where I really only wanted to plant a hedge, now I've got 10 varieties worth of fruit. So you're going out of the box. You're not doing things like a farmer would do. You're not doing things. In most nurseries that you walk into and tell them you want to plant a citrus hedge, they're going to look at you like you're from outer space. They have no concept, because fruit trees to the average horticulturalist is just one little facet of all the things that they have to do during the day. And they probably don't pay a whole lot of attention to one thing or another. Unless you find a real fruit tree enthusiast, they're probably not going to tell you about the potentials for backyard orchard culture. So, but you guys are the poster children for that. You guys are the group that experiments. You guys are the group that tries new varieties and tries new concepts, and you don't mind multiple planting or multiple budding or doing things in a different manner than what a farmer would consider correct or what the average horticulturalist would consider correct. So don't be intimidated by doing something out of the box. When the neighbor walks over and says, oh, you can't prune that tree that low, or you can't plant 3 varieties together like that, just say thank you for your opinion and go on home, leave me alone, and do what's going to work for you. So, and like I said, are you going to fail? Sure, things are going to fail. Plants are going to fail. Trees are not going to live forever. You're going to lose things from time to time. You're going to plant a variety that maybe didn't do as well as you wanted it to do. That's an opportunity to do something different. That's an opportunity to expand out on what you have in the orchard. So any questions on planting concepts or hedgerows or multiple buds or espaliers? Yes. Let's move on then. So let's talk about mulching, irrigation, fertilization, and pest control. We'll do questions after from this point on. How many people are mulchers? Oh, good, most of you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share what I consider to be the 4 most important attributes of a good, healthy mulching program. And then, for those of you that aren't mulchers, I'll give you an opportunity to rebut. So let's talk about the 4 basic important concepts of mulching. Number 1 is pretty easy. Number 1, 2 to 4 inch layer of a biodynamic mulch will make better use of your irrigation water by 50%. Simple. It's a proven fact. We've done it with mulching studies at UCR, Cal Poly Pomona, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, UC Davis, University of Phoenix, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I've done mulch studies at every one of them. Cal Poly Pomona, I've done 4 mulch studies. UC Riverside, I've done 3 mulch studies. So we know for a fact that a 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch makes better use of your irrigation water by 50%. So if I have a nice mulching program going, I can now start to irrigate half as much as I did before on everything in my landscape that's not hardscape or lawn. So that can be a direct savings. If you have a $100 a month water bill, and half of that water bill is outdoor and half of it's indoor, and you have a mulching program on 50% of your landscape, you now have a $12.50 savings every single month. So that's $144 a year. I can probably put my mulch layer in for that amount. So plus you're saving an important commodity that is rare right now in the state of California. We don't have enough water to go around. If we're wasting water, we're kidding ourselves. And when you wait and see what happens in the next 10 years with the price of water in the state of California, you're gonna be horrified. You think your water bill's high now? Give it 10 years. In fact, if we go back into a severe drought condition, not this year, maybe not next year, but the year after that, you know what they're gonna do? No outdoor irrigation, period. What's that gonna mean for all of us? So the last thing we wanna do is waste water. So if I can save 50% on 50% of my landscape just by mulching, if that was the only reason alone to mulch, I'm in. I think it's a good cause. Number 2, 2 to 4 inch layer of biodiverse mulch will keep your soil temperatures cooler in the hottest part of summer by 15 to 20 degrees. That takes the physical stress element off most trees at the worst time of year for physical heat stress. So if I can do that, if that was the only reason to mulch, I'm in. I think that's an important enough reason to have a good mulch layer. To eliminate that physical stress, to allow those trees to take up nutrients and carbohydrates in a more natural manner like that is extremely important. Number 3, a 2 to 4 inch layer of biodiverse mulch will bring back all your beneficials. It allows plants and trees and your roses and your tomatoes and your gladiolas to feed in a manner that they were meant to in nature. They have that decomposing material on the surface of the soil which brings back mycorrhizal activity, brings back earthworms, beneficial insects and fungi that help the trees to grow in a more natural manner. Extremely important. If it was only that reason alone, I'm in. I think that's reason enough to mulch. Number 4, pretty simple. What's the worst chore in the landscape? Weed. A 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch will keep your weed seed germination down by 90%. So if I can save 90% of my weeding just by having a layer of mulch there, again, I'm in. I think that's an important enough reason. Taking the worst chore out of landscaping. You're still going to have a few weeds that'll blow in the wind. You'll still get some milkweed or an occasional groundsel or spurge or something, but in general, 90% elimination of weed seed germination. Don't ever mulch over Bermuda grass. If you have viable Bermuda grass and you put a layer of mulch over it, it's coming back with a vengeance, and baby, you are not getting rid of Bermuda grass at that point. So if you have Bermuda grass, control any of your rhizaceous grasses before you put your mulch down on the surface, because it's near impossible to control it once you get a mulch layer. So here we go. 4 important reasons to mulch. Making better use of your irrigation water by 50%, keeping the summer soil temperatures cooler by 15 to 20 degrees, bringing back all your bioactivity and mycorrhizal activity, keeping weed seed germination down. So irrigation is absolutely a must. We're not going to grow much of anything except maybe a puntia cactus in Southern California if we don't get some irrigation on there. So irrigation is a must to have good quality fruit, good quality vegetables, and a healthy landscape in Southern California. So there are a few things that we want to consider with irrigation. Number 1, with our water compromised state right now, we want to make sure that we have no runoff. If you have any runoff, you need to correct that. So you need to either adjust the sprinkler heads or the type of delivery system that you have, or you need to recreate your basin so that that water that would normally run off is now percolating in somewhere on the property and giving you benefit. So 0 runoff. We don't want any runoff on any type of irrigation from this point on. Runoff is not only a waste of your money, it's a waste of a resource that we don't have to waste. So make sure that you're containing your runoff. Now, something interesting happened to the irrigation industry about 40 years ago, and that was the invention of the irrigation timer. So how many people have an irrigation timer? Yeah, a lot of you do. So here's what an irrigation timer does. And I'm just talking about a time clock. At whatever time you set it for, 5:15 in the morning, it comes on. And it runs. And if it's set to run for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or a half an hour, then that's what it's going to do, and then it's going to shut off again. What it doesn't realize is what today's weather's like. It doesn't think. It doesn't have a brain. So it doesn't know whether it's raining and 50 degrees or 105 degrees and sunny. It doesn't know whether it's December or April or August. All it knows is that it comes on at 5:15 in the morning and it shuts off after it runs its cycle. So if you have a simple irrigation timer that is mindless, you have to be the brain. You have to think for this system because it can't think for itself. And I can't tell you the amount of people that I come in contact with that say, yeah, the landscaper put this system in 1994 and we haven't adjusted it since. So the lawn comes on every morning and the shrubs come on every third morning or whatever, every single month of the year, every single day of the week. It runs constantly and it doesn't get adjusted. That's ridiculous. To think that a tree is going to use the same amount of water in December that it uses in August? What a ridiculous concept. So if you have that system that doesn't realize what the temperature's like or what the weather conditions are like, you need to make sure you're the brains for that system. I'm adjusting my system constantly. Now, fortunately for you, the new systems that they've come up with in the last 15 to 20 years are 2 different types of systems. One is based on weather station data. So it looks at what the local SEMA station has put out as data for that day, and it's going to say, yeah, it's going to be 68 degrees today and partially sunny, and the transevaporation rate's only 20%. We have plenty of irrigation, we don't need to come on. So maybe in August it's going to say, yeah, it's going to be 105 today, transevaporation rate 80%, so we'll come on and we'll run a full cycle today. So that system thinks, that system understands what the national weather data is for the closest registration station to your area, and that's what it's going to irrigate off of. So if it's raining, it doesn't irrigate. If it's really hot, it's going to give you some extra. So that's supplementing the needs that those plants and trees would have at the time of year when they need them most. The other system is based on a tensiometer, which is a ground probe. It's just like how many people have a moisture meter? Yeah, so if you took a moisture meter and you stuck it in the ground, it's going to give you a moisture reading by percentage or just by simple gauge. It's going to say wet, moist, and dry. So if it says wet, don't need to water. If it says moist, you don't need to water. Once it gets down to somewhere between moist and dry, you should do a thorough irrigation. Well, that system is going to do exactly that. So it's only irrigating when the soil requires the irrigation. It's not going off of weather station data, it's going off of actual moisture percentage in your soil. So every system has a couple of 2 or 3 different probes. Every valve has a couple, 2 or 3 different probes, and it's going to average out that information, and that's what it's going to irrigate. Now, both of those systems, 10 years ago, the brains alone were about $3,500. So nowadays, I was up at Farm Supply up in San Luis Obispo the other day, and they have the weather station data-based system for $199 now. So I guarantee you, it's not the $59 5-station timer, but I guarantee you that extra $150 that you spend on that system, you're going to save that in less than 1 year. just by that system irrigating properly. So if you are irrigating, make it count. If you're out there with a hose, you're twisting a valve, whatever you're doing, make it count. Get a good, thorough, deep irrigation on your plants and your trees, and let them go slightly dry in between irrigations again. Watch the weather, watch the time of year. Plants and trees are going to use more in the early summer, midsummer, late summer than they are any other time of year. I typically will go through in November and shut my whole system down. And in a normal year, last year, 2017, winter of 2017, I didn't run my irrigation system one time between November 1st and April 1st. Didn't come on once. This year, I've irrigated 4 times in between November 1st and right now. So now we're going to get a little bit of rain, probably back off again. As long as we get a ½ an inch of rain, you can skip a full 1 or 2 irrigation cycles. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention to the needs of your plants and your trees and irrigate accordingly. Don't waste it. Don't have runoff. I'm not going to tell you what the best delivery system is, what the best type of distribution head is. I don't really care. As long as it gets water from point A to point B with no runoff, that's the most important concept. So let's talk now about fertilization. Since we all understand proper mulching and proper irrigation, plants and trees still have to eat. We have to eat every day. Plants and trees have to eat a few times a year. So I always look at a tree's year kind of like our day. You know, we wake up in the morning, you want some breakfast. Tree wakes up in the late winter, early spring, you want some breakfast. So the first fertilization that you should be putting on, end of January, early to mid-February. You want to get it on before you have new bloom initiation and new growth. So get that breakfast out there early. The tree's going to start making use of that as soon as it starts to grow out. We would have a midday meal, a lunch meal. You want to feed that tree again probably around April, early, mid, late April. Give it that lunch. It's going to be using that through the early part of summer as it's maturing fruit, as it's putting out some growth. Those nutrients are there for it to make use of. We're going to have dinner late in the day, light dinner. I think trees probably mid-June to the end of June, maybe early July. That's when you want to get that dinner feeding out there so that they can make use of that through the rest of the summer. Now, that's a kind of a 6-month on, 6-month off. And that would kind of compensate for our night, where we're not eating at night before we go to bed or while we sleep at night. So the tree's not going to do that. It's not going to eat during the winter months when it should actually be sleeping as well. So you want to make sure you're putting the nutrients on when the tree's going to use the nutrients and not putting it on when you don't want the nutrients there. So feeding at the wrong time of year. If I was feeding in September, October, November, that's kind of like the equivalent of going to Starbucks at 11 p.m. and getting the Venti Frappuccino with an extra shot of espresso and drinking that down and thinking you're going to go home and go to sleep. So I don't know about you, but if I do that, I better have like a 5-hour drive or a 2,000-word article to write because I'm not sleeping with that caffeine. The tree's not going to sleep well. It's not going to go dormant well with that fertilizer late in the season. So timing is every bit as important as product. 6 months on, 6 months off. Container plants, a little bit different, probably 9 months on, 3 months off. So I'm going to stop in October and I'm not going to feed November, December till the end of January, and then I'm going to come back in on container plants. Container plants are going to leach out the nutrients much more rapidly than anything in the ground. So 9 months on, 3 months off, as opposed to 6 and 6. The product, extremely important. You want to make sure you're feeding for a purpose. So what is that purpose? You've got to take that into consideration right up front. Am I planting a small tree that I want to grow into a big tree? At that point, nitrogen is my friend. Nitrogen is what's going to give me that green color, that vigor, that flush of growth. It's going to allow me to develop a nice fruiting structure on a small tree in a short period of time. So nitrogen gives us growth. So what happens after 2 years in the ground when my tree is now 8 feet tall and well balanced and well structured and I've got fruiting wood developed on it? At that point, I'm going to switch gears on my fertilizer product. I'm going to get away from the high nitrogens and I'm going to go with the high phosphorus, high potash, trace elements, and preferably something with a humic acid base. So nitrogen gives us growth, phosphorus and potash give us root stability and the promotion of flowering buds. If you don't have flowering buds, you get no fruit. So you're going to use a fertilizer that's balanced to grow flowering plants and trees and promote that bloom character. That's where the fruit comes from. So the P and the K and the trace elements provide a strong root system and a strong, well-developed, perfect flower that will eventually give you fruit. So nitrogen to grow the tree, P and K to produce the fruit. So you're going to switch products as you move on and your trees become more size, acceptable to you once you get them to the size that you want. A little bit of nitrogen is always good, but where I would be looking to grow the tree, I would be looking at 2 to 3 times the amount of nitrogen as the phosphorus and potash. When I get to the point where the tree's up to size, I want 3 to 4 times the amount of phosphorus and potash as nitrogen. So I want a lot more P and K than N. So any questions on feeding before we roll on through? Yes?
Yeah.
If you've enjoyed this educational moment by Ivory Organics, be sure to like it, and most importantly, by subscribing below, you'll be connected to this and all of our other educational gardening videos. Thanks again for watching, and happy gardening.